everybody, thanks for watching RPG Channel. This is James. And have you ever watched a movie or read a book and thought, wow, I really want to play this? And that's a completely valid thing to feel when you're watching a really cool movie or something like that. It's like you want to be a part of that, or you're reading a book and getting into this history and these characters of some setting, and you want to expand on it. You want to do stuff with that setting. And this is completely fair and legitimate, and there are in fact a lot of games out there that are based on material from some other source, be they movies, comic books, or just straight up novels. And you can even make the argument that gaming itself got its origin because of the desire to play in someone else's world. And then other people will argue against that a lot. But regardless, so say you decide to run a game in a pre-constructed world, like something you didn't create but you saw in a movie or read in a book. There are a couple of things you need to keep in mind about that. One of the first things is you have the benefit of having source material that the players likely have access to. It's not something you wrote up on your head. It's not spread out over 5 different text files in a JPEG on your laptop somewhere. It is there. The players can go see it for themselves, and everyone comes to the table with the same idea of what the source material is. And that's great. But there are a few other things that you want to keep in mind if you decide to try to do this. One of the first things that will throw someone off when they try to do this is, say you take a popular movie or series or something like that. The players want to be involved in the pivotal story arc, which is completely understandable. That's what they just watched all the cool stuff happening with. So one response is to put the players in the shoes of those characters. And if you have players that are into it, that is awesome. But you have to be really careful though, because once you hand those characters over to the players, then they have free reign to do whatever they want to do with that character. So you might end up with situations where Luke Skywalker was holding Princess Leia ransom for the Death Star plans, or any number of out-of-character things that will completely derail the story that you want to tell. Is that a bad thing? Well, yeah, probably that is a bad thing. But is it something that you want to encourage? No. But the players have the right to do that. I mean, that's their character as soon as they take over the role, so why not? Another thing you run into is, like, you've seen these what-if scenarios in, like, websites and stuff like that where they talk about, like, well, why didn't this character just do this or something like that? And the reason they didn't do that is probably because the person making the movie or writing the book wanted to have the consequences of a certain action take place rather than the consequences of one action. It was just a plot device. But when the players are doing that, they have free reign to do whatever makes the most sense to them at the time. So they're not going to necessarily follow the plot of whatever story you're trying to recreate. And lastly, and this is one of the big problems I have when attempting to run something in a setting that I didn't create like this, is why? The main story has already been told. You already know how it ended. So why do you want to, do the rebellion against the Galactic Empire again when you already know how that worked out? Like, why do you want to take the One Ring to Mordor when you know how that plays out? Now, there are a couple of ways of dealing with this. And some of them have worked better for me in the past than others. It's up to you to decide how you want to handle it, and, it's been mixed results whenever I've tried to do this. First thing is set the players somewhere else in the setting, somewhere apart from the main action that takes place in the movie or whatever. So say you're doing a Star Wars game, then okay, that's fine, but it's not going to be about, they're not going to be in the same theater that Luke Skywalker and Han Solo are in. They're going to be like stuck on Tatooine or doing something in the Dagobah system or whatever, someplace like far, far away from the events in the movie, so that they get to have a lot more freedom over what they want their characters to do and how they want their stories to develop. And that's completely fine. You run into video games and slash fiction like this all the time. The downside to doing that is the players have a lot of knowledge that their characters probably don't. They know where characters like Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker and the Ring Wraiths and everything like that, they know where these things are at, they know what they're doing. So I've run into situations before where the players have thought, hey, I've got an idea. Let's just go hunt down and kill all the named characters from the source material. Why not? And if that's the type of game you want to run, I mean, it can be a lot of fun. But if it's not, then you need to find some way of dealing with that before it gets started. Another way of dealing with this that I have had a lot more success with is to set the game at a different point in time. So, for instance, I've run 2 different Lord of the Rings games. One of them took place before the Lord of the Rings stories actually took place, like actually even before The Hobbit took place. And you got to see a lot of the pieces kind of starting to come into place, but like the events of the War of the Ring were still so far off that it wasn't directly apparent who was doing what, and fortunately I was playing with people who weren't gigantic Lord of the Rings buffs, so that worked out for me pretty good. Another Lord of the Rings game I ran took place in the time period after the War of the Ring, and I made certain to tell the players that once this game started, it was our own thing, and I wasn't feeling obligated to stick with the canon that Tolkien kind of set up whenever that story arc ended. It was like, from this point forward, this is our own setting. And that worked out pretty well. Another game that I played in the Marvel setting, I basically just had to say the named characters like the X-Men, Iron Man, stuff like that, those characters aren't actually here, and we're just going to be doing our own thing in this universe. And, I mean, you could make the argument that that really wasn't a Marvel game, but still, I mean, that's a choice I made because I didn't want it to be like, what Marvel character is going to show up this week. And it did work out rather well for me, and I enjoyed it. So, these are just some things that you're going to need to take into account if you want to run games like this. And there's a lot of benefits to doing it, but there's a lot of things you have to take into account that you don't even have to think about when you're running a game in a setting that you yourself made up. So, have fun, and I will talk to you later.
Did I walk in front of you? There's nothing here?
Yeah, you did. No, it's fine. I'm going to edit it out. I just forgot what I was going to say. Thanks a lot.